Welcome to the Running for Real podcast, where each week we bring you a conversation designed to help you create positive change in your life, community, and planet. It's a collective of conversations about running, the climate emergency, and social justice. Running for Real is for the brave, for those with courage and vulnerability. United by our love of running, we're driving momentum towards some of the really tough challenges we're facing as humanity. So come join me, Tina Muir, and let's get started. Hello, my friends. Welcome to episode 246 of the Running for Real podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm excited you are here. We are already closing in on the end of April. It means it is almost May. Yes, logical, I know. I think there's a lot of excitement starting to happen now. People are starting to feel positive about maybe a full racing season will be possible. And I feel people are feeling a lot more optimistic about the future of racing and just being able to see one another again. I felt this was an important episode to cover today. While we go into this new world of possibilities within our running space, we want to make sure that we are bringing everyone along with us. It is not just about those people who have been in the sport for life, but we want to make sure that any runners who maybe have picked up the sport during this tough season, or maybe people who have the potential to pick it up in the future, are also included. So that's why I wanted to cover this episode today, to dive into this a little bit deeper. And I couldn't think of anyone better to cover it with than Maria Solis Belizaire, who is the founder of Latinos Run and Latinas Run. She is just a wonderful human. You're going to get to know her in just a few minutes, but she also has done a lot for the community, building up people to come into the space, and not just Latinas and Latinos, but just across the running community. We're going to get to hear about her background and just get to know what affects her and what we can do to be more supportive members of the running community. So I just want to take a moment to thank our sponsors, and then we'll be right to the episode with Maria. Thank you to Momentous for sponsoring this episode of the Running for Real podcast. I am excited to tell you about something different today. I have given you little snippets about this in the past, but now I can say I have used it within my race, seen the benefits of it, not just within my working life, but also within my running life. And I'm excited to tell you more. So Momentous has a product called Brain Drive. You've heard me talking about their collagen peptides. You've heard me talking about the performance creatine, and you've heard me talking about elite sleep. Brain Drive is for focus, motivation, and memory. It is a supplement designed to optimize brain function and support long-term brain health. It's going to promote focus, motivation, positivity, and learning they're combining these doses of these research-backed ingredients that support the production of dopamine and acetylcholine, which are those neurotransmitters that's responsible for how the cells in your brain communicate. I have really been enjoying this, as I mentioned, as a caffeine-free alternative when I have chunks of time to do work. And I have found that it has really helped me to stay on task, as in not be task switching all the time, be working on some writing and then suddenly check my emails and then pop over to an article that I found on Twitter. I really have found that I've been able to just stick with things a little bit more. It almost feels like you've got some kind of little cheat going on. It doesn't feel like you should be able to focus as well as you do. I also used it in my race. I took 2 Brain Drive tablets at the halfway point of the race. They went down well, and I focused for 4.5 hours scanning the ground in my trail race. And as I won it outright, the first man being 34 minutes behind me, I feel like I can say it worked decently well, and I didn't fall once. So it's that niacin, which is essential for nervous system development, function and maintenance, and also the vitamin B6. There's a lot of that in there, B9, B12, and some other ingredients that I don't want to even try and pronounce, but they are definitely things I have heard of before, so don't worry about that. You can get 20% off your order at livemomentous.com by using code TINA to get 20% off your order. That's livemomentous.com to get 20% off your order. Maria, thank you so much for joining me today on the Running for Real podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to have a conversation with you.
Yeah, I'm excited that you're here, and I'm excited that I get to have this conversation with you. And I'm wanting to hear what the community wants to know about you. I have created some questions here, but I want to start with the basics of what you do, being that you are the founder of Latinos Run and Latinas Run, which serves, I couldn't tell if it was 25,000 runners total, or is that one of them? And then
they're pretty much mixed, because a lot of the runners that run with Latinos Run also run with Latinas Run. Okay. So we service about 25,000 runners combined.
Okay, that's awesome. Okay, so let's start with that then. The big question that may be a bit confusing to some people listening here. Latinos Run, Latinas Run. They may hear the word Latinx thrown around, and obviously there are a few other pronunciations that people may have heard over the years. What, in your opinion, is the correct terminology or language that our listeners should be using, or why have two separate groups there?
So people choose between, like, for my community, I'm also part of Hispanic community. But when you talk about Latinos or Latinx, you're talking about people that live in that region. So it can include people who have like a Hispanic background, but people can also have like a French background, like Haiti. So people choose to call themselves what they like. We've asked this question on our group page because most of my sponsors tend to write stories or do, like, our Facebook. We have a partnership with Facebook. They do videos and they always put Latinx. So I particularly use Latino, meaning like men or women, or Latina, which is just specific to women within our groups. But younger generations, I think, may start shifting towards the Latinx, using that word to kind of be non-binary. And, it's for men, women, doesn't matter. But it's kind of like a little argument that people have. I think the older generation doesn't feel comfortable calling it Latinx or doesn't know how to pronounce it. So I think people just feel comfortable. We've done the questions in our group page, and majority of people felt comfortable just sticking with Latino or Latina.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And is that, when you say that you've had discussions, does it get heated, or is it kind of a fun discussion?
Yes, it gets heated. I think any discussion, because our group, like, when you talk about Latinos, like, we're not a monolith. We all, like, are very different. We come with a very mixed culture that's extremely different and very much the same in some ways. So yes, you have people who may be like more Puerto Rican, more connected to United States, where they feel that maybe Latinx is the word for them. But you have also people who come from like indigenous places where they don't understand this new, terminology. It doesn't click with them, and they probably don't even say it in their own country. So, I think I always believe it's people's preference to each their own. So I choose to use Latino or Latina. But like I said, with a lot of our writings or any type of things that we do, like a video blog, a lot of the people who write them up or record us always put Latinx. So
what would be your suggestion for someone listening who comes to meet someone who they suspect, wants to be known as Latina, Latino? They don't want to ask the question of where are you from, realize how racist that is. To you said about the various like the different cultures within the Latino communities. What would be the best way for them to navigate that? Is it to ask directly? What would you suggest?
I mean, I'm a very mixed person, and a lot of the people that I know within my community are very mixed as well. So we, even within our own community, ask each other, where are you from? Because we make up so many different countries and so many different cultures and so many different races that it is just a standard question. I know sometimes people get offended by asking, where are you from? But when you come from a multicultural background, I've always asked people that question. I've always been asked, so I'm comfortable with it.
Okay.
Yeah. But I know some people are not, and I respect that. So
no, I appreciate you sharing that. So let's talk about the incredible variety of cultures within the Latino communities. And just that there is that diversity in itself that many of the white people listening may not really think about.
Yeah. So, I mean, you have people from Central America, South America, the Latin American, islands, Puerto Rico and stuff like that. So it is an extremely mixed, diverse community of people. And even within that community, you can see like people from Argentina may be typically more white. People from Dominican Republic may be more culturally mixed with like indigenous Taino or African American roots. So we are very, very different. Our languages are a little bit different even though we all speak. I mean, Latinos, like I said, is mixed. Some people speak French, some people speak Spanish. Even though like within the Latino community that's Hispanic, we speak the same language, but we also have our own dialects. My family is Puerto Rican and Mexican, and I know that my Mayan roots have their own indigenous like language that is not based on Hispanic culture from Spain. It's based on the indigenous land they lived in for centuries. Mm-hmm. So it's an extremely diverse and probably the most diverse ethnic group there is the Latinos. So.
Yeah, thank you for explaining that. And I would encourage people to go do your own listening, go do your own reading. I've asked a few very basic questions there, but I also don't feel, and I'm sure you agree, Maria, that it's not your responsibility or my responsibility to educate people. That is where you can do some of your own learning about, the cultures and different places that people may come from, like Maria just mentioned there. I
had to learn it on my own also, because like I said, I grew up in South Florida with a very more Cuban and Puerto Rican community. And that's what I went to school with. Almost everybody I knew as a kid was Cuban. And then when I started traveling or even moving to New York, I even had to educate myself and start Googling, what does Latino mean? What does Hispanic mean? Because even within our own communities, there's a lot of confusion.
Yeah.
And why is it that some Hispanic countries or Latino countries may have more Black people or more African roots, and why some may have more indigenous, or maybe why some have more white? And that's an education that I think we have to do it on our own, and it takes time to kind of understand. And I think it's a learning process that I'll probably spend the rest of my life trying to understand.
For sure. Thank you. Getting back to Latinos Run, Latinas Run, you focus on beginners to those who are advanced and passionate about running. But I'd love for you to explain, like, why is it important to start with beginners, or why include beginners? I mean, that's very much something that every running group or every training group would include, is we want to include beginners, but it seems like that is a real focus for you. Why is that the case?
So there's two reasons. First of all, I think within our community, within the running community, there's this misconception that it's for one type of person. And you don't see a huge percentage of people that look like me within the running community. So I feel like we have to start them off somewhere, because a lot of times many Latinos don't feel like that's for them because they've never been exposed to it. Or they've never had that introduction, to getting involved into running. So that's important that we start there. And also the second reason is because when I started running, like participating in group runs or even races, I was left behind. And there was no like beginner, for somebody like me, even though I was running about a 9-minute pace. And I was being left behind, like on long runs. And these are like when I would join like larger organizations that would do these big runs with like 500 people, and they would break us up into groups. It just really wasn't something for people who are not as fast as others. Somebody who might be doing a 15-minute pace or even an 18-minute pace. A lot of times they're not accepted into these groups because people may feel like, oh, we don't have time for you. But people have to start somewhere. Mm-hmm. So I always have this, rule that nobody gets left behind. And if you want to start, even if it's with walking, that's what I started with. Couch to 5K. You walk a minute and run 30 seconds, so you have to start. We are beginners when we're getting into this sport, a lot of us. So, you have to start somewhere.
Yeah. And as someone who's founded this now huge group and got to meet runners from, every different level, ability, background.
Right.
Let's talk a little bit more about that aspect of, I've heard this has been brought up many, many times on this show about people starting running and being left behind or feeling as though they didn't belong. I mean, you did talk about the, not seeing the role models. And we have talked a lot about on episodes about you can't be what you can't see. But I would love to just go into the beginner specifically angle of it, because that is brought up often. And yet I would say, even if you remove the word the inclusive side of it in terms of what it is used for now, and just use inclusive in terms of all are welcome to run, that seems to happen a lot. So what have you discovered from learning from these, thousands of runners that you've now got to know?
The fear of wanting to start because of being left behind, or actually being left behind. It's kind of like a turnoff for people. If you go to do a group run and you can't keep up with everybody, you're not coming back. You don't feel like empowered to go back to that group run again or do a race, because you feel like you're going to be one of the last ones. And we have to really change that narrative and kind of empower people to be happy being out there and not leaving them behind. But, it just happens so often. Like I said, it happened when I started, and it's part of the reason why I started Latinos Run. There's this misconception sometimes that we don't run. Like, I would get these comments all the time when I started. And the reason why I launched the group was so that people weren't being left behind. And people in my community, who tend to not always be the fastest, were constantly being left behind. So I felt like we needed a safe space where people felt welcomed at all levels, whether you're a beginner or you're truly advanced, extremely fast runners. I wanted to make sure that we had that safe space. So that's why I created the group. But yeah, there was a lot of pushback in the beginning and a lot of comments from people within my own community. This misconception that Latinos are fat, Latinos don't run. These were the comments I was getting all the time. And I kind of wanted to change that narrative and really create that group where people didn't feel like they didn't belong in this sport.
No, thank you for all the work you've put in there. And how do you make sure then with your group that that doesn't happen to anyone else?
So most of our runs, like if I do pop-up runs across the country, or like our huge Hispanic Heritage Month run, I always try to do like a 5K and also a 1 mile, so that people feel like even if they have an injury and they can't run, they could just come out and enjoy it and kind of empower other people. And I always stay at the back of the pack, because I always feel like sometimes you have to lead from the back. Yeah. So to make sure that nobody else is left, to make sure that people, we had a gentleman in LA whose family came. We had about 250 people show up for this huge run we did. And the gentleman who was the last one to finish actually just had surgery, and he was walking on like a kind of I don't know what they're called, walkers, not a walker with wheels, but like he was handicapped and had like the hand kind of canes. And he did the 5K, and it took him quite some time, probably took him about an hour, but I made sure there was people with him, that he was not being left behind. And he just was like crying at the end. While his wife was telling me that she was so happy that he wasn't left behind. So that kind of really always reminds me and encourages me to make sure that we always have that space for people. That it doesn't matter if you're walking or if you have a disability, that you're not going to be left behind or left out of the group. So, yeah.
It's funny because it's something that sounds so obvious that we've all had that experience where we've gone to an event or a run or something and had that awkward feeling of where you're standing there, you don't know anyone, you might pull out your phone to like pretend you're doing something, but we know how uncomfortable that feels. And yet I think probably most of us have been guilty at one time in our life or another of being within your group or the people that you know, and kind of acknowledging that someone over there is on their own, but not wanting to either be uncomfortable or stop your conversation or something to go welcome that person in. But as you've mentioned, that first time you do something, or if you were traveling, the only time you might be somewhere, I mean, that can set up the rest of the way someone thinks about sport. Like you said, that could totally turn someone off to the point of where they never try running again. That's not for me.
So the first time you go out is that first impact somebody has to whether to decide to continue or to leave. And I can't even tell you, like in the beginning, we used to have a coach that would lead. And I remember being out of town one week and he left runners behind. And I'd reached out to one of the runners. I said, why didn't you come back? And she said, I was left behind and I was lost. And when I had first started running, I was left behind and I was also lost. And the group that I was with was lost. It was about 5 of us or so. We had gotten lost doing like a 10-mile run. And I just remember being like, this can't happen. Like this shouldn't happen at all, where people are getting lost. I've been on a trail race. I did a trail race with my twin sister, and it was a very small race in South Florida, like 60 people. I couldn't find her. I was sticking to the pack. And then I said, well, where is she? And I went to go look for her. She was lost on the trail. And we ended up coming last in the race long after everybody else. But I remember thinking, oh my God, like she was really lost in this like jungle trail and had no clue where she was going. And it kind of scared me to make sure that, okay, I can't, like, even with my family, if I'm going with them, I can't leave people behind. So for me, like running is not about coming at a certain time. Like I know everybody has their own goal to reach where people do want to beat their time and they want a PR. For me, it's really about enjoying the sport and enjoying the activity. So I always make sure that I just stick in the back of the pack, go whatever pace I have to go. It's not about time for me. It's not always about the medal, but it's about enjoying the experience of the race and the people that I'm with.
Hi, friends. I am really excited to tell you today about a brand new sponsor, a sponsor I've had on my dream list for quite a while because they are so aligned with Running for Real in every single way. I just knew and hoped that someday there would be an opportunity, and here we are. I'm excited to tell you that Running for Real is now sponsored by Picky Bars. So you would have heard of Picky Bars. We had Jesse Thomas, one of the founders and CEO of Picky Bars, on the show a few weeks ago. We've also had Lauren Fleshman and Stephanie Bruce on in the past. And Picky Bars are these performance bars that are not full of these gross, strange ingredients that are really hard on digestion. The actual real food bars that were available were not really great for sports. So Picky Bars came along and decided to make a bar that was performance and made of real food. It has that balanced 4-to-1 ratio, so carb, fat, and protein for quick and sustained energy. It's easily digestible. It's gluten-free, dairy-free, soy-free, GMO-free. They also have some vegan options if you are interested in them. They taste so good. They are really enjoyable to eat. They have tons of really cool products. They've actually gone now beyond these energy bars, offer performance granola, performance oatmeal, performance pancakes, and drizzle. This is this almond butter topping with superfood maca that tastes good on everything and anything, especially when you just, as I shouldn't tell you this, but dip your finger in. But I am one of those gross people who does that. So I'm excited to tell you that you, as one of my listeners, can go to pickybars.com/Tina to get 20% off by going to pickybars.com/Tina. That's pickybars.com/Tina. That will get you 20% off. That's good for all orders over $25. And you can get an additional 20% off your box if you try a Picky Club membership. So what is a Picky Club membership, you are asking? That is where you are going to be able to get a selection of products that you can choose. You can pick whichever ones you feel will work best for you. And you will get them sent to you as a subscription each month. And I'm just really excited that they've given this extra offer of an additional 20% off. When you spend $25 plus, you get 10%. When you spend $45, you get 20%. And when you spend $65, you get 30%. And then you get that additional 20% off as a Running for Real listener. You can get to choose your bars. You get to build your box as you like. You get to pick a granola. You get to pick an oatmeal. You get to pick a pancake and a drizzle. Just a fantastic thing to get each month delivered to you. So remember, you can go to pickybars.com/Tina to get that special discount, and go check out Picky Bars today.
So for me, like, running is not about coming at a certain time. Like, I know everybody has their own goal to reach, where people do want to beat their time and they want a PR. For me, it's really about enjoying the sport and enjoying the activity. So I always make sure that I just stick in the back of the pack, go whatever pace I have to go. It's not about time for me. It's not always about the medal, but it's about enjoying the experience of the race and the people that I'm with.
Yeah, so I think that's a good call to action here for people listening. Next time you find yourself at an event, even if, some of your friends are there who you haven't seen in years, go over together. I mean, you could make a lifelong friend. You could be that person who encourages someone who then becomes a lifelong runner to enjoy. And I would argue that, especially in the case of group runs, and I mean, I'm sure I've been guilty of this at some point. If you are going to a group run, unless it's, a really important day and you have a race that, I don't know, a few weeks to go, and this is your most, final workout or something like that. If you're going to a group run, I would imagine most of us, if we were going to a group run, it's not really going to matter if you run a few minutes slower per mile than you usually would. But the impact that could have could be one of those that's exponential than that 2 minute faster you would run per mile. So encouraging everyone listening, next time you see that situation, go up to the person, especially if they're standing there doing that thing we all do, just kind of, huddled into themselves, feeling nervous, anxious. Go say something and invite them in. So thank you for that reminder, Maria. That's really important. One final thing before we go on. Do you think there is any element to this that is just the cultural of like, I see so much like individualism, particularly from, myself being one of them, like white people. I want this, I'm going to go there, get this. And while there are some people who are starting to recognize that, the Latino, Latina, Hispanic, a lot of the cultures you mentioned earlier, it is very much a family atmosphere. Like, let's do things together. Let's be present together. Right. Do you think does that element come into this, do you think?
Of course, 100%. Yeah. Because when I first started running, there wasn't a lot of people, like the groups that I would go to, there wasn't a lot of people that looked like me. Mm-hmm. And I realized that even by joining, like one of the first groups I'd started was Black Girls Run, and they wait for everybody.
Yeah.
And then just joining other multicultural groups or just running with them for the day or even partnering with them for a group run. It's very different than doing, say, a group that is predominantly like white. Where I would get left behind. But I noticed that like with a cultural group, even with our group, with a bunch of Latinos, it becomes like a party sometimes. Mm-hmm. Like people are just having a great time. And yes, there's always somebody who's trying to train for a certain race and goal. And I get that. And they're really focused on that. And I'm, proud of them for doing that. And there's also the group that just wants to enjoy the atmosphere. Mm-hmm. And it's very, very different joining like a group run with us as opposed to joining, like, for instance, another group run, maybe like a Nike group run or whatever. Mm-hmm. It's extremely different.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for, I shouldn't say thank you. It's not something that I think we want to continue for that much longer, but I think
that's based on our culture though also, because Latino people tend to live in larger groups.
Yes.
Like when you see them join like a race, for instance, I think a lot of white people may join the race by themselves and partake in it. But whereas the Latino community, you have a mom signing up the kids, or the husband in the race. So it's a little bit different because we tend to come with the family, and it's kind of like an event where it's like kind of like going to the movies, joining a race. And I don't think that, and I may not know, I'm not white, so I don't know, but I think what I tend to see is like white people a lot of times will go to a race, like they'll sign up by themselves without their family, without their partners. So it's a lot different within our community. And I think maybe that's why we tend to wait for each other, or we tend to enjoy runs together, because it's our culture. Yes. It's how we are in our house, in our home. Or if we go to events with parties with other families, we bring everybody with us. So that's part of our culture more than anything.
Appreciate you sharing that with us as well. Thank you. Okay, let's go back to your running journey yourself. You were active as a child, but running really came into your life when you faced some adversities as a teenager. Can you share some of what running meant to you at that time it came into your life?
Yeah. So, I mean, like you said, I started running as a kid. I obviously, like many of us, we do races in school. That was just normal. And I fell in love with it. My dad would take me to the track. But then when I got into high school, it's when I had an opportunity to join like an actual track team. But during that time when I was in high school, my mother did become incarcerated. So, my dad having to work a normal 9-to-5 job, like many of us, we had wait after school and we wanted to partake in some activity. So track became the thing for me. I knew I loved running. I knew that I played many sports and I would only make the team because I was a faster runner. So I did join track in high school, and I decided I was just going to go for long distance, which is the first time I'd ever done long distance running. And looking back on it now, it's just so different because obviously the amount of education I've had now, as opposed to in high school, the coach would just say, go and run. I didn't know what that meant. And mind you, I lived in South Florida. It is burning hot, humid. It is pure hell. You don't have water. You don't have like a pack on you. You don't know where to stop if you need water. It's just, I kind of felt like I was just left out there and without any real proper training. And, now as an adult getting into the sport, it's kind of really changed my mind. I wish I knew back then what I knew now, because it was a bad experience for me in high school. But I continue on the track team because, like I said, my mother was incarcerated and I needed something to do to kind of fill that void and, find some activity. So
when you said it was a bad experience, that was purely from the training side of things, of just having no clue, and like injuries wise?
I never got injured in high school, but I just felt like when we would go out for a run, they would just say, go run 3 miles. I didn't have a Garmin watch. I didn't have the right proper running shoes. I didn't know what any of that was. And I just felt like I was just left out there to run. And it's like, where do we go? What am I doing? How far do I run? I was left behind, So I just, obviously in high school, a lot of us walked around after. So I knew which direction to go. It was just one way and turn back around. But there was no like proper training. Like, what do I eat? Because on my first run, I caught a cramp literally the second the race started. And I've always told this story that like the moment the race started and I thought, I got this, I'm going to do good. I've always been a good runner. I caught that cramp and I could not run. I was just suffering. And I can hear my father in the stands laughing, saying, I can't believe she's going to come in last place. And to this day, I still give him crap for it because he thought it was the funniest thing that I was coming in last place. And he's screaming at me, don't come in last place. I literally came in right before last place, second to last. So, and the only reason I did is because I can hear him yelling. But after that experience, I barely did any more races. I just didn't know like anything about the proper diet, nutrition, hydration. I didn't know anything. So it really changed my idea about running. And I pretty much stopped until I became an adult. And
I'm curious there. You did say like, you wish you knew what you wish you knew more. You wish you could, have had that guidance. But like, do you think you actually would change that if you could, or do you think that's given you that empathy and compassion for new people you meet now within your groups to like know what that feels like, not like to put yourself in their shoes, to have no idea?
Yeah. So like I always try to tell people, like try to get as much information as you can, because even when I started running as an adult, I would do races and I would drink a gallon of water before. And I did one race one time in Washington Heights, and it was this high, steep hill, and I stopped to throw up because I didn't realize that you can't drink gallons of water before a race. I could just feel the water like bouncing in my system. And I just feel like, like I said, I just really wish I knew more than I do now. But now we live in a different time where you can easily access information, where coaches are training different because they have more information. Science has changed. There's a million products out there. Those things weren't available at the time when I was in high school. We didn't have like the internet came out when I was in high school. So it's like there was no Google or anything. So, I mean, now I just hope that I can help educate people, even though I don't have the answers to everything. I know everybody's body is different. What we eat, drink before a race. We've had this discussion in the groups. Everybody is very different of what works for their body. But knowing that there's companies out there that can help educate us is really important for me, to make sure that we share that information within our group so that people know the proper shoes, the proper diet, the proper nutrition, whatever the case may be, the proper form. Those things are so important. And I think now we have better access to that information.
Yeah. I mean, that definitely is the case. It is just interesting to, I often find myself thinking about that, just the difference now. And I'm not sure if you are comfortable saying how old you are, but
43 in 2 weeks.
Okay.
So,
all right.
yeah.
So you're comfortable there. So, like, there's so many things that the internet brings to us, and like those are some good examples of we can look up all these things. We don't have to, find a coach and ask them to sit with us for 2 hours and can you tell me everything? You can just do it on your own. Do it. There's all these free things, but then there's the other side of it that puts that pressure on and makes you feel like there's a right answer when, like you said, everyone is very different and varied, and it can make it seem like, okay, the food you should eat is oatmeal, but I don't like oatmeal. So now what?
And also, like, even when you go to a running store, like the first time I went, like they had me try on all these shoes, and I'm like, that doesn't work for my feet. Obviously, now they have, these machines that can really help get you the proper shoe, the proper fitting. But, I think it really takes you trying things out to see what works better for you, for a lot of us, because what somebody may tell you may not be the proper information that works for you. Because I've had a lot of people tell me about this shoe works and that shoe works. And those are like the worst shoes where I've had the most injuries and the most pain. And it took trial and error for me to figure out what works best for me. So yeah, even the professionals don't always have the right answer, unfortunately.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
You said about that race, so was it after that you kind of were like, I quit the team, I'm done? Did you keep running on the team, but just say, I don't want to race? Like, what was the situation there?
So I did a couple more races after that, and I did continue to train for a little bit of time with people that I knew. But I ended up switching over to shot put and discus, and I was really good.
Very extreme switch.
Yeah, I was really good at like discus. I don't know how even shot put I like made it as far as I did. So I was really good at that. So I stuck to that. But obviously running was always in the back of my mind, because as a kid, like I remember the coaches pulling my parents over and saying, Maria's not the best soccer player, but she's the fastest. So they would only put me on these like traveling teams where we would win like, nationals, because I know that I was the fastest, and they would put me in defense, and all you do in defense is like run. And, that's all I remember. And as a kid, I hated it because I didn't like that we had to do like mile before practice and we have to spend 2 hours running the entire time. But I knew that I was good at it. So it just kind of like getting into my teenage years and realizing that maybe this doesn't work for me right now. I still dreamt about running. I still wanted to participate. I just didn't know how, so I kind of took a huge gap. I stopped running. And then one day I went to Florida, and my twin sister and I, she just called me up and said, let's go do a 5K color run race for our birthday. And it was like the first time I was like, oh my God, like I haven't run in so long. This was like my dream as a kid was to be a runner. I would always say it to myself. I wanted to be like a professional runner. And I kind of felt like a little bit of, I redeemed myself back into the running space. And it was my first like introduction into participating in races. And I absolutely loved it, even though I couldn't run 10 feet at that race. I walked the entire thing. I just loved it so much. And I was like, how do I get into this?
Thank you to Beam for sponsoring this episode of the Running for Real podcast. I have been really excited to work with this company. I love their Elevate Variety Pack. I have used the balance, the performance, the recovery mixes in various situations in my life. I recently used the Perform. I had 2 packets of Perform throughout my trail race recently, and it went pretty well. So I feel pretty good about that. And I also used the recovery blend after the race to help myself recover. So just a little bit more about Beam products in general, these hydration products. We are always dehydrated, or at least I am. You get the variety pack has this, you get the 3 unique electrolyte powders to help your body with whatever it is doing, whether it needs balance, whether you're trying to perform. It's got that green coffee bean extract to give you some caffeine, and also has compounds like beetroot and vitamin B to help your body convert energy into, diet energy into physical energy. And then the recovery has collagen, while the branch chain amino acids support those tired muscles and help your body to fight fatigue. It also has things like coconut water, Himalayan salt, and magnesium in it. And if you're just looking for this holistic athletic performance and recovery support, this is a great thing to elevate your routine, I suppose. You can get 20% off your order by going to beamtlc.com and signing up for a subscription, or you can get 15% off your order with using code TINA by going to, beamtlc.com. I have really been enjoying these. As I said, they were a big part of my trail race recently. I managed to use them to stay hydrated, to make sure I kept my electrolytes up for almost 4.5 hours. So I really recommend these products. I'm really enjoying using them. You can go to beamtlc.com and use code TINA to check out more.
And it was like the first time I was like, oh my God, like I haven't run in so long. This was like my dream as a kid was to be a runner. I would always say it to myself. I wanted to be like a professional runner. And I kind of felt like a little bit of, I redeemed myself back into the running space. And it was my first like introduction into participating in races. And I absolutely loved it, even though I couldn't run 10 feet at that race. I walked the entire thing. I just loved it so much. And I was like, how do I get into this? So,
Did you find yourself in the years between there then thinking at times like, oh, I wish I could get back into it? Or maybe seeing someone, something comes up on a news article that you're reading about a runner and you think, oh, I kind of miss it? Or
not really. I would have some trainers and I would go to the gym. And obviously, I think a lot of people, when you go to the gym, especially women, we don't want to go to the weights because we feel intimidated by the men that are by the weights. So our options, like when I was in my 20s, was to get on the treadmill. And, even my trainer would have me run like maybe a mile before he would, do some boxing with me or whatever the case may be. So I was still kind of running, but I wasn't really thinking about running as a sport because in South Florida, I didn't know about that. I didn't know what participating in a race was. Like, Boston Marathon and New York City Marathon has been going on for decades. Those things were not like available to us in South Florida. I never even heard of it. I never knew what a 5K race was. I saw walks, like a walkathon, but I never knew anything. And obviously the internet was a little bit newer, that people weren't searching that type of stuff. So I wasn't exposed to it, I guess you can say, in South Florida. But the moment I got to New York, I lived next to Central Park and I would see people running all the time. And my roommate would go running every day and I would go see the races. So I was like, what is this? Yeah. So that's kind of how I got introduced to it, because I actually saw it. Like I just, I was exposed to it when I moved to New York City. So, yeah.
And what was your once you did, re-enter into the running world, you mentioned about being left behind,
Right.
and that having an impact on you. But what are some other things along the way that you remember being kind of monumental moments in up to this moment now?
So when my sister had me do the race, the 5K in South Florida, we did the whole tutu, dressed up, everything, because that's what people were doing, back then. And we'd match outfits. And I call my friend and I say, I just did this 5K race. And he's like, well, I'm training for 100-mile. And it was like, come on, just let me enjoy my exciting moment of doing a 5K. But he was like, really one of these trail runners that would do these extreme races, which I'd never even heard about, 50-mile, 100-mile. Like my body cannot even do that. So he mentioned to me about the New York City Marathon. And mind you, like I said, I lived a couple blocks from Central Park South. So I would go see the marathon every year, but I would see it when it was daylight. I don't know if you know about the New York City Marathon, how it changes. Like by 4 p.m., it's pitch black. Even though there's tens of thousands of runners still out there. So I would go when like the first group of runners would come, but I wouldn't see anybody look like me. So I didn't know that I could participate in the New York City Marathon. I didn't know that was an option. And he says to me, well, don't you know they have this program 9+1 and you could do the New York City Marathon next year? And I was like, no way. Like people like me could do it. I didn't know that was an option. Like I said, I wasn't exposed to it.
Yeah.
So there were 10 races left and you had to do 9 races plus 1 volunteer to race. So I signed up immediately. And even though I always tell people, he bailed on me and didn't show up to the race. And I was fighting in my head that night. Do I go? Do I not go? I ended up going, and it was the Pride race was my first race. Have you ever been to the Pride race? It is
I
like
have not. I've heard about it. Yeah.
It is a party. It's not even just a race. It's like a huge party. There's like free gifts and music. And I was like, I love this. Like I had such a great time, even though I was alone. And I think I took like 50 minutes to finish the race. I was like, okay, well, I already had signed up for the other one. So I'm just going to do this. And that was kind of the turning point for me. Like, holy crap, I can do a marathon. But now it's like, well, how do I find a group to train with? Because I don't feel comfortable doing this alone. And I would start going up to people asking, do you know any Latino groups? Do you know any Latino groups? And he would just go, no. And I would look for anybody that looked like me and ask them. And they would be like, no, I've never heard of any. So I went to like Google and I typed in Latinos Run. And it was like GoDaddy popped up and it was like, do you want to buy this website? And I was like, no, wait, it's available. So I bought the website and it sat there for years. And I was like, one day I'm going to do something with this for my community. So it took a couple of years, but I finally just did it, and kind of like turning point for like my entire life.
So how did you go about it? Was it a case of you just were kind of collecting people without it being an official group? And then eventually how did that work?
So I would go up to people and ask if they could help me start Latinos Run, because I knew some Latino runners, or I knew people who were Latino, and I would say, do you want to start a group for us? And they were I kind of like felt like people found it like, we don't have time for that. I would get like really rude comments, and even some of them came from within my own community. Like I said, people would say Latinos are fat, Latinos don't run. And I was like, no, this is not true. Go to Latin America. There's millions of people running. So I just felt like I just had this really like rough part in my life. And I lost my job, lost my apartment. And the first day in like a new apartment, I was like broke as can be, had a couple bucks to my name. And my choice was, what am I going to do with my life? And the only thing I felt like I loved at that time was running. So I had a coach that kept calling me and messaging me, can I train you? I didn't have money for him to train me. And I'm like, what are you training me for? Like, I don't have any money. So I called him and I was like, hey, can you help me start Latinos Run? I'm not a coach. I don't have any information. Can you help me start it? He was like, sure. So in like 2 weeks, we started Latinos Run, and it was like our first group run. It literally just happened like overnight. And immediately within a couple of weeks, I was having this huge group run with like Black Girls Run with me. And I was on like TV, ABC News, and it kind of like exploded from there. And and immediately a lot of women said, how about Latinas Run? And that kind of idea started to have a women's only group. So it kind of was like, it grew organically, but it grew really fast. And and it's ever since, it's just been a blessing.
That's really cool. Thank you for sharing that. What advancements and healing have you seen within the, I'll just say Latinx for ease community overall since you started Latinos Run and Latinas Run?
I've seen a really huge shift, and this isn't just coming because I started Latinos Run. There's other people who've been around for a long time who have a predominantly Latino group. I've seen within the last couple of years a huge shift with who participates in races, especially like in New York City or LA or Miami, where it was like more a white man's sport, has now become really multicultural. So for me, that is kind of like the healing I see, is trying to change the way running looks. And also within our community, because we have such a high rate of obesity and a lot of health issues, it's really gotten people to kind of get motivated to put some sneakers on and go out. And I love to see that shift within our own community, to see the statistics change the other direction, where we become more of a healthier community. And also to see a change within running in general, running community in general, to see more diverse people.
Yes.
And I've seen it explode in New York, especially in those Black and brown communities. And I am like all for it. I am all for it. I'm so amazed, like, to see so many people that look like me, who speak languages like me, like, to see them out there participating in this with family. I'm telling you, like, 2-year-olds are out there with them. And I love it. I find it amazing. And I just hope that we can continue this and really grow within our community. So, yeah.
It sounds like you are definitely the driving force behind that. It takes a village.
It takes a village. There's many people, doing it like me. So
well, the more people you bring in, the more people they inspire. So it just spreads, which is awesome. Yeah. Is there anything else you want to share about what this community, bringing it to life, has taught you, enlightened you with? Anything else?
Yeah. So, I've spent a lot of time on the road, which I'm in right now. We're just moved to Houston. And I've last couple of years, I probably go to like 40 states every year throughout the country, just get in a car and drive. And I try to educate myself on what's happening within these communities. And it's really hard sometimes to see why certain races, I'm the only person of color. Like, I try to understand why is that, what's impacting these communities. And I really hope, like, my goal is really to see like more brands, running brands, health brands, become more diverse in who they sponsor or who they, send information to or share information to, or how they publicize their information, what the images look like, who's being represented in those images. I think it took me traveling the country, meeting so many cultures, meeting so many people, to understand why so many Latinos are not participating in races, and what I have to do from my end to help change that narrative. Because I can go to a race like in Indiana. I was the only person. And when you have a bunch of white men coming up to you asking, what's that name on your shirt, and trying to understand. And I know they're asking for a good reason. They're trying to understand. But the fact that I'm the only one there, I've been to so many races where I am literally the only person of color. And you have all the stares and you're like, it shouldn't be like this, because some of these cities have a population, a Hispanic population or a Black population, but why are they not participating in it? So I really hope that, my goal is to kind of change the narrative and change the way we see running, so it becomes more inclusive and more diverse.
Mm-hmm. And I can imagine that for someone like you, who's been doing this for many years, who is that kind of leader and just has been through all these experiences, you can handle a race in Indiana where you're the only person, and you can say like, all right, we got to change this look around. But for someone who, as we've mentioned earlier, it's their first time, they may look around, and as we talked at the beginning of this, like, no one here looks like me, that, I don't belong here.
Right. Yeah. So like when I started running, like just even I had a treadmill in my house. That's how I would run. And I gave my treadmill to my father, and my father had a heart attack, and he asked, since you're not using it, can I use it? And he took it. My father has been running every day for decades, 3 to 6 miles a day.
Amazing.
And even when I started Latinos Run, and I knew that my dad ran, because I go to his houses, where whichever house I go to, he always has a treadmill in that house, and I would use it even if it's walking. And I never put 2 and 2 together that I started Latinos Run and that my dad has been running like as long as I can remember. Every single morning, 6 a.m., he's on his treadmill. And I asked him, I never seen you do a race outside.
Mm.
Like, why is it? I've never seen you participate in a race or run outside. And I didn't know. And it was really like emotional for me when my father started explaining that when he would run in the community that he lived in, which is a predominantly white neighborhood, he would have people throw things at him, beer bottles, cans, call him the N-word, that he became so frightful of running outside that he refused to, even if that includes running in a race. And to this day, I cannot get him to participate in it. And I think after seeing what happened to Ahmaud Arbery, I think those fears, really sit in somebody like my father who doesn't want to put himself out there. Sure. And, especially when my parents have a farm in Kentucky and my dad I would never run in that neighborhood. And, it's just a kind of scary place to be outside when trauma, you're the only Black person. Yeah. So I really hope that changes, but I don't think that's something that we'll see anytime soon. I think that fear still lives in a lot of people. When I travel the country, I run in different neighborhoods and I get people who stop by and look at me. They'll stop their car, look at me like, what are you doing here? And I just kind of go on my own, but I know that experience could be more dangerous for somebody else. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of something that sits in my mind all the time. But like I said, part of the reason why we created the group was to have that safe space where we could run together, even if it's not in a safe neighborhood or even if it's not in the best park or in the best area, we feel safer. Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for sharing that. I mean, that's obviously horrible to hear and even worse to go through. But I think people need to hear things like this to recognize that this is an everyday reality. Yeah. What is the dream for the community and to you? But I'd love to know, what would you like to see this become? Oh, I mean, I just would love to see more Latinos participate in running. And, like I said, Latinos are just such a mixed group of people. And I would love to see that the diversity within our own culture being represented even in the running space, where we don't just represent 5%, but we actually represent, our population, where we represent 17% of this country. But we probably represent 5% in races, and in trail races, we probably, 1%. I hardly ever see somebody that looks like me in a trail race. So I would love to see that change. And it's not going to happen overnight, but I think if we really try to encourage and empower people to get out there, I really hope to see, a really diverse community within the running space. Mm-hmm. So that's my goal. Yeah, I love that. Is there anything you would say listeners can do to support your community to just be a more inclusive running friend? Yeah, I have a lot of companies and a lot of people who reach out to me asking what they can do to get more people, Latino people to join their event or whatever. And I said, sometimes it's about exposing that community to what you have. A lot of companies may post an event on Facebook, but people who speak a different language don't know where to get that information. They're putting dollars behind advertisements that aren't directed towards our community. Mm-hmm. So finding ways to invite them into your event is important. We obviously are Latinos are one of the largest growing demographic group in the country. Why would you want to leave them out? We spend money, mm-hmm. So, and I think a lot of times people don't think outside of the bubble that they're in. Yeah. I've had this conversation with so many CEOs who think that, they've never really thought about it. And it's kind of shameful. And I think a lot of times they say it's shameful. We've never thought about reaching that community, which is crazy. We never thought about having an advertisement with somebody who looks different, mm-hmm. which is crazy. So I think that inviting that community into your event is so important. Reaching out to them, seeing how you could diversify your events. It really just benefits everybody at the end of the day. So, you're absolutely right. Is there anything else you would like to tell the listeners or share that we have not covered yet? No, well, they can just find out some information about us. If anybody's interested, they can go to our main website, latinosrun.com, and check out who we are, or go to our Instagram pages, Latinos Run as well, or official Latinas Run, and check out some information about us. And our events like Hispanic Heritage Month, we have at the end of the year. We have our 4th anniversary of Run for Justice, which is on July 17th. And we've partnered with Black Men Run again this year. And come join us, because it's not about just the Latino community or the Black community. We need everybody to kind of lift each other up. So we always welcome everybody. We have a lot of people who are not Latino within our running group, and we are all for it. So we welcome everybody. Come join us.
Love that. Thank you so much for sharing your story, your heart, and just all that you do. You're a true bright light in this world. I appreciate you, Maria.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Before we end this episode, I just want to take a moment to shout out my podcast editor, Jeremy Nessel, who has done such a wonderful job of looking after my podcast, taking out all the mishaps in the episodes, while still keeping in the vulnerability and the realness and the rawness of the conversation. This is not one of those podcasts where I take out the ums and the ers and the sometimes the delay in words, because I think it's very important to keep that authenticity. We're surrounded by perfected and manicured everything, and I think it's really important that Running for Real stays that way. So thank you to Jeremy for your work. I also want to thank Maria Vargas and Amber Moore, who are also part of my team. They've been a big part of this community and me being able to build this brand. So just want to give them a shout out too. All right, let's get right back to the end of this episode. Thank you so much to Maria for joining me today. I really enjoyed that conversation with her. I admire that woman. What a woman. And you definitely should go check out her community, go support them, go be a friend. And I just think that we can all play our role here in being supportive, and what she is doing over there is just one big way that you can make a difference in a very small way that doesn't require much of you. I want to take a moment to thank our sponsors for this episode. Thank you to Momentous. You can use code TINA at livemomentous.com to get 20% off your order. We can also go to our new sponsor, Picky Bars, by going to pickybars.com/Tina. That's pickybars.com/Tina. You'll get 20% off, which is good for all orders over $25, and an additional 20% off if your box if you try the Picky Club membership, which I definitely recommend. And finally, thank you to Beam for sponsoring this episode. You can get 15% off your order or 20% off a subscription by going to beamtlc.com to go check out those Hydrate, the Perform, Balance, and Recover products that are great in your water, especially during these summer months. Thank you so much for listening today, and I'll see you next week.